just relaxed and paying attention.
Hey, listen to those birds. That's the birds. Yeah, remember those guys in the fifth dimension? Yes, indeed. Welcome back to 21st Century Radio. I'm what's left of Dr. Bob Hieronymus, and we have a very important guest tonight, Dawn Baumann Brunke, and we're talking about awakening the ancient power of snake, transformation, healing, and enlightenment, published by our dear friends, Bear and Company. They're good friends for lots of reasons. You can.
They're actually a great publisher. I really love working with them.
They are a great publisher.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. And they cover so much. And they know quality because they've been in this a long enough time to realize that there are people that look like they know what they're talking about and don't. And there are people that don't look like they're talking about and they do. So they... They choose them. All right. Now, where were we last hour?
Where were we? We were at the cliffhanger.
We were at a cliffhanger.
Yes. Do you remember?
Yeah. Yes, I was going to ask you about what's your feeling about reincarnation?
I feel like it's a really useful paradigm. And I don't know if it's the only paradigm, but I think it's a useful one. And should I bring it back to snake since we're talking about snake?
Yes, please. Yes, ma'am.
What I first thought of when you said that is the Ouroboros.
You got it.
You know, excuse me?
You must be psychic. That's exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's the snake that eats its tail. It looks like a round circle, with a snake that has its tail in its mouth. Mm-hmm. And the Ouroboros, it's from the ancient Greek, meaning tail eating. And actually, it's a really, really old symbol. One of the Egyptian gods, I think it was a tomb, I'm not sure exactly, but it was represented by a snake eating its tail. So it's this really classic image of eternity and cycles of renewal. And it also symbolizes what we were talking before, that joining of opposites, the beginning and ending, male and female, yin and yang. Mm-hmm. It kind of represents a wholeness and a oneness of life. What's really interesting is in alchemy, the ancient alchemists considered it a sigil, which is a symbol that has magical powers, Yeah. And Jung saw it as an archetype, kind of a key to transformation and a way that the psyche could integrate opposites, ways to assimilate the unconscious or shadow material in a more conscious way. So, in terms of reincarnation, it's this cosmic cycle of ever becoming. And again, what does it have to do with transformation, renewal, change, ever change, right?
Right. Well,
always becoming.
As we evolve, we move into higher levels of consciousness and other dimensions at the same time. And of course, one of the key things about that has a lot to do with the way you treat people and exactly how much you take care of your family, in my opinion. And of course, we have small families, and then we had the larger family of other people. So obviously, I believe we are our brother's keeper. Now that sounds pretty corny, doesn't it? Especially now, when I'm beginning to hear from fundamentalists that we aren't. They've changed things a lot. Jesus isn't the same person as he used to be, and that's unfortunate. There was important the 10 laws that were given to us are important, but they don't seem to be important right now when you take a look at especially politics.
Well, we're really going through huge changes right now, and I think it's all over the place, Yep. And I think it's just, for me, the answer is really staying centered, staying focused, really working with my own shadow material, because I feel like the more responsible we can be, kind of reclaim our own, inner bully, inner narcissist, inner conniving world leader, the more that we can kind of emanate that outward. And so I do think, you're right when you say we're going to see huge changes. We already are. We're seeing this incredible, just change from one extreme to the other. And isn't that kind of indicative of right before you have a huge transformation, you really see all this craziness and all this imbalance that's, trying to balance itself. I live in Alaska, you mentioned before, and we have earthquakes here. And I was just noting, talking to somebody about earthquakes the other day, is before they come, you get this feeling, or I always do, of the earth feels like jelly. And I can feel that the earthquake's coming because the earth, I feel something in the house or outside where the ground feels like jelly, like it's just moving and moving. And then you have this tremendous release, which is the earthquake. And then you have a new stability.
Well,
maybe that's what we're going through. We're going through a huge earthquake right now, huh?
yes, we are. We are. But
Yeah.
I think the best part of this is what we'll see well after the election, and that deals with the children. The children now know. They saw what happened. They watched television. They know who said what and how, and they are smart. They're a lot smarter than the people that are that are just saying that they're going to be taking care of these children. We're not taking care of these children. We're not taking care of a lot of children. That's something Jesus would have said. How in the world can you look at yourself and do that kind of thing? You can't.
Well, we do. We have this old paradigm that's breaking down. It's breaking down. And so people who are of that paradigm are desperately holding on, and I think you're right. I think once it breaks down, who's going to carry the new forward? It's not going to be the old. It's going to be the new. It's going to be
Yes.
the young. And there is going to be this new wave of energy coming in that, clears up the mess and then creates something new. Yeah.
And, well, that's the way things evolve, and that's obviously extremely important over long periods of time. Now, in many goddess-based religions, as you note on page 50, priestesses of the temple held, wore, or danced with snakes. Why was this done? What was
Well, I
going
think
on here?
because from an ancient time, snake was very connected with the female. And we see that in older myths and legends. And like I alluded to before, that kind of snake was an advisor to goddesses, to the goddess, huh? And so there was this natural affinity between the two. And I remember that chapter. It was interesting because I was also looking, I think that chapter maybe later, the differences between how men and women hold snakes, and you have kind of the snake charmers, which tend to be male, and they have this snake in a basket. The symbology is great, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they're playing this flute so that the snake comes out of the basket. With women, and there was a period of time when the snake ladies, the snake charmers, were very popular in Europe and even in America, and you saw more of a dancing with. And I think that has to do with the ancient goddess and those temples where women would naturally dance with snakes, and it would be a much more sensual kind of fluid movement, huh? It's all about curves, and it's all about movement and the sway and the entwining of snake. So what does that tell us? Just that snake speaks to the different sides of us, the male and female sides, in different ways, huh?
In many ways.
And
Yeah.
in many ways, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, sometimes while writing this book, I would get a little blown away because snake covers so much territory, huh, with humans throughout the ages, and it really does have an immense, an enormous, and fantastic tale to tell, a story to tell, and it's still with us, huh? It's still. And I think you see this in history too. You saw a snake where a snake is very much a god, a goddess, and then you see snake very low, demonized, and it's shifting. It's shifting. There's this great myth from the Australian Aborigines about the rainbow serpent. And the rainbow serpent lives underground. It's a female and has all of these animals inside of its belly. And then it comes up. It comes up out of the earth, and it births all the animals, and it goes up and down, and it creates the mountains and the gullies and the valleys and the riverbeds. And there's just this beautiful notion of snake as a creator, and snake as the populator of the earth. And I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but it came to mind.
Well, let's go in this other direction.
Yeah.
Did St. Patrick really banish the snakes from Ireland?
It's a great story, isn't it?
Well, it's a great story.
Yeah, it is a good story. Well, scientists tell us there weren't snakes in Ireland. There was actually the Ice Age at that time, or before that time, that got rid of snakes. But the whole, and I thought was fascinating is I found a lot of other legends of male gods or heroes or saints, that would banish snakes or kill snakes. And I think that goes along with that whole shift, to a more rigid patriarchal culture. And, we have to get rid of the snakes because the snakes are, you know, they're the female, they're nature. We have to get rid of that which comes up against rules and order and patriarchy and control over nature. So, yeah.
Well, why is the snake the favored primal resident of our psyche's foundation?
That's Carl Jung, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, again, it speaks to transformation and change and a desire to integrate that which hasn't been integrated yet. So on some levels, it's about, snake is just a snake awakens Kundalini up in the spine. And esoterically, snake, I think, helps us with change and with transformation and does live in the basement of our psyche, so to speak, because it's an instigator and inspires change and awakening. And I think that's why so many people dream about snakes when they're kind of at a place where a big change is going to happen in their lives. I've talked with so many people who had these amazing snake dreams right before everything really broke down or right before everything really began. So snake is definitely an initiator of change and of helping us bring together that which has been disconnected.
Well, Joseph Campbell noted that while the hero's adventure involves encountering the dragon, the deeper reveal is discovering that the dragon is in fact oneself. How so? How so?
Well, I think that's always the truth with shadow material, isn't it? Our shadow is, and again, a Jung term meaning that which we kind of disown or repress or don't believe is inside of us, and it's projected outward. And the reveal is, that our psyche kind of projects this information outwards, or these less than ego enhancing visions outward. And we believe the problem's out there, but the secret is the problem is in here.
Of course.
It's, and that's why I say, I think one of the most important things we can do right now during this time of upheaval is really retrieve our own shadow material and begin to integrate, invite that snake to help us integrate that which has been disowned or repressed or feared within ourselves.
But this one was a real shock to me on page, oops, we got to take a break. Okay, well, let's take the break and we'll come back on this shocker. That shocked the heck out of me, but I'm easy.
Tell me the page number so I can prepare.
133. Page 133. We're in the latter part of the interview, and so we're in the latter part of the book. Rules and Regulations 506 of the Penal Code. We always follow directions. All right, now can we take the break, Dr. Kortner?
Hello, this is Penelope Smith, Animal Communication Specialist. I'm a pioneer in the field. I've been doing this over 35 years, communicating with animals, and I've written Animal Talk and When Animals Speak. And this is 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronymus.
I wonder, is she still alive? Is Penny still alive? Gosh, I hope so.
I believe she is.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
A remarkable person, but she must be in the 90s right now or something.
She is. I interviewed Penelope Smith for my first book, and she was so gracious and helpful, and she really is the grandmother, really, in America of animal communication. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you know her. I'm really fascinated with her work, and her no ego, just helping anybody that needs help without worrying about costs and things of that nature. something happens to people when they get in this kind of work, which is kind of loving. And they kind of think, by and large, what they can share is of more importance than bossing you around and that kind of stuff. Well, what is meant by there is no such thing as a poisonous snake? Now, this really confused me.
That's the editor in me, you know. So the difference between poison and venom, they're both toxic, but they're toxic in different ways, huh?
Yeah.
So the main difference is that a poison is toxic if it's inhaled, absorbed, or swallowed, but venom is toxic only if injected. So you actually cannot die from drinking snake venom, only if it's injected into your bloodstream.
Isn't that
So there's
something?
no such thing as a poisonous snake. It's always
Wow.
going to be a venomous snake.
If I would have been asked that for my PhD, I would have got it dead wrong. So it's a good thing Dr. Krippner never did that. Anyway, but I was surprised at that. I learned so much from your book. I really did.
Oh, thank you.
And
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I wish I had more time in my life to get more in the one of the parts I didn't get involved in, if you don't mind my telling you, because it ran out of time, was in the very back in the bibliography. I did not have a chance to go over all of your bibliography. I did see, of course, Manly Palmer Hall there. Good old Manly Palmer Hall. Boy, that guy, he worked his rear end off and that kind of thing. But anyway, that's the only area I didn't get a chance to really go over because I have 1,400 other things to do. Right?
I hear ya.
Yeah.
It was actually such a fun book to research because I did get to go all over the place. You know, just from the biology of snakes to the, to the myths and legends, which I love, to the science, and there's a whole chapter too on helping snakes. And I got to talk to some really wonderful people who work with snakes, both taking snakes out of, people's gardens and houses, and as well as some wonderful people that work with bringing snakes to schools and teaching young children about snakes and helping them to not have phobias about snakes, but to really understand them. They were wonderful to talk to, and I'm so glad there's people like that in the world.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe, do you want to talk about a couple of the different snakes? Because
Yes.
I also have the appendix is, I really wanted to include this in the book, but it was so difficult. So I did an appendix of different snakes, just because, there's over 3,500 species of snakes. And what's really amazing is we're still discovering snakes. Who knew, right? So, I just wanted to talk about some of the different snakes. And some of them are I found so fascinating. I think my favorite is a little snake called the Brahminy blind snake. And it's only about 6 inches long, and it kind of looks like an earthworm. And the amazing thing about Brahminy blind snakes is that there are no males. They're all females.
Maybe they had the right idea.
It's pretty wild, isn't it? They travel via the horticultural trade. That they're sometimes called the flower pot snake because they kind of hide in flower pots. And so they've colonized entire new lands just by traveling in in flower pots and tree pots and going to new lands. And they're just an amazing little snake. And then you have the other end of it. You have anacondas up to 300 feet long, 500 pounds. They're incredibly slow moving. They like water. They're a member of the boa family. And they're very peaceful snakes. They prefer solitude. And you have really fast snakes, the black mamba, up to 14 feet long, can travel up to 12 miles an hour, and can average 7 miles an hour over long distances. I mean, pretty amazing, huh?
That is, yeah.
There's also flying snakes. There's 5 species. These guys really, I just was fascinated by the flying snakes. There's 5 species that have evolved this ability to glide incredibly long distances. So what they'll do is they'll slither up a tree, a very high tree, and they'll hurl themselves outward like a frisbee, and they'll kind of undulate their body while they're gliding and land unharmed.
I wonder how they learned that.
Yeah, amazing, huh?
Yeah, because
Amazing.
You would
Yeah.
seldom think that they're going to be, well, I know they're in trees, but to jump out and fly at you is something
Right.
else. But I guess
Right.
they wouldn't be flying at people or anything, would they? Or what?
No, it's to move,
Right.
and to get to travel new places, and they don't need a passport.
Well, that's going to,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to do that in the future, that's for sure. Why do shamans see snakes in their visions or while exploring the mind of God? I found this very fascinating,
Yeah,
especially
well,
the
that's
story of
that, and
Jeremy
Melanie,
Narby.
yeah. So there's a story of Hermes seeking the mind of the universe, and it presents as a snake, as a dragon, actually, which it's kind of an incarnation of snake. Snake and dragon are synonymous back in ancient legends. So anyway, why do shamans see snakes? It's a great story. It's a thing that happens all over. I tell the story of anthropologist Jeremy Narby, who goes to the Amazon jungle in 1984 to learn from plant shamans. Shamans, how do they know so much about all of this incredible stuff? And the shamans always tell him the plants tell us. So the shamans explain that there's these invisible beings that live inside all living creatures, and they know everything. And often they see them as snakes. So Narby eventually uses ayahuasca, and he sees many multicolored snakes as well as huge boas. And this fascinates him. Here are these snakes that the shamans see. Here are these snakes that he sees. And as he does research, he realizes that people who are exploring consciousness see snakes, not only in South America, but all over the world, even in places where there's no snakes present. Why should that be? Why are these life-creating, knowledge-imparting, entwined snakes showing up in, dreams, myths, voyages? He eventually connects it, interestingly, to DNA. The entwined snakes curving like in the DNA coil. Could scientists and shamans both be perceiving DNA, but in different ways? The double helix contains the body's core message, right? Or it's our blueprint. And the shamans are seeing it as these curling snakes, these invisible beings that know everything. And they're seen in altered states as spiraling snakes. So you have this really interesting clash and collision and coming together, of DNA represented by this twisty ladder and shamanic visions of spiral ladders connecting the realms. And it begs the question, is the DNA symbol, our ancient connection with the inner snake? Snake is the integrator, that which joins realms or joins opposites. It's the activator of healing, Kundalini, awakening energies. It's the opener of the third eye and the enlightenment. It's snake who instigates the awakening of Adam and Eve.
So
Snake is protecting us and guiding us,
yes, and it's our friend. Obviously, it sounds corny to say, but I believe all animals are our friends.
Yeah, it sounds funny, but yeah, it is.
Unless we
Snake
start doing
the snake is a part of us. Is another way to say it too.
Yeah.
There's this ancient snake within us.
Well, I'm going to tell you a secret. A
Yeah.
secret that I don't think anyone, basically in the media, that when we discuss things like this, and that is, how do I put this? But the serpent, according to ETs, the serpent being is the master.
Mm.
And the beings that I've seen photographs of these beings, they're pretty extraordinary. I was just wondering, because I have not obviously bumped into any of these, but have done a lot of research. And by the way, if anyone out there wants to learn more about these kind of things, there's a network called Gaia. You ever heard of Gaia?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think they are very much ahead of just about everybody else in regards to what's been going on in outer space for a long time. That we have, most people have nothing no knowledge about, except if you got into studying very carefully. Most of the shows that they have are extraordinary, especially in regards to these other beings who, most of them have in ETs, many of them have animal heads, which is fascinating to me, but at the same time probably scary as hell to just about anybody else, and I can understand that. But I think that there's a reason for that their being in such prominence. I don't know exactly, of course, what it is because I don't know enough about it. But I found it very interesting to know that as we talk about serpents as being very advanced and higher consciousness, etc. here, but that is exactly what is expected of with the ETs. That's what they expect of those beings. So it's a very interesting, from my point of view, it's very interesting because I've heard before a long time ago that was not true, and I'm glad to see that more research has been done in that area. So I don't.
You know what's interesting about that too is that, and you just kind of connected a dot for me, or some dots for me about this, is that some cultures saw a snake as this cosmic sky creator, and it really it would come down from the sky, or sometimes from other realms or other dimensions, and then it would connect to the land or the sky to birth life. And then we also see snake as being underground, like I said before about the Aboriginal view, or, and it's linked to fertility and creation, and kind of this great mother is coming up from the earth or as the originator of life, huh?
Yeah.
And it's just like if you think about that, ET or that other dimensional extraterrestrial being coming down as a snake, and then the mother goddess kind of coming up as a snake. There's something there too, huh? That's twisty-twiny and has to do with integration and maybe the connection of, sky and earth, and again, snake as the connector of realms, as one who brings realms together. So it makes sense to me that snake comes from the sky as well as the land or the water, the unconscious, or the ocean.
Well,
it's interesting, huh?
Yes, it is. You mentioned. Talked about a few species that have remarkable qualities. You mentioned the blind snake and the flying snakes, but I never expected. I was really surprised about the king cobra, in the sense that it growls. Is that right?
It does, and if you can look it up on the internet.
Like that.
It sounds like Darth Vader. To me, it sounds just like Darth Vader. It has this immense, intense growl. Yeah. But king cobras, they call them king cobra for a reason. They can raise up a third of their body to face humans, and they're up to 18 feet long. So they're actually the longest venomous snake in the world. And they'll eat other snakes. They're shy. They're shy snakes, but they have a big mythology and a big growl. So yeah, they're pretty amazing.
Yeah, that I was fascinated by that. But again, I learned so much from your particular work here. How do we awaken snake in the world today?
That's a good topic.
As a matter of fact, can we take our break now so that we can really get into this, because this is really important from the standpoint of why we have decided to have this book on tonight. So let us take our break. Our guest is Dawn Baumann, Brunke, Awakening the Ancient Power of Snake. Transformation, healing, and enlightenment. Please use those three words all the time when you think of snakes. Published by Bear & Company. And you can reach her at animalvoices.net is her website. And you can click on it from the front page of 21stcenturyradio.com, where all of our guest links are stored. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and YouTube for free audio archives each week.
Hello, this is Rosemary Ellen Guiley. I'm the author of the Encyclopedia of Magic and Alchemy and many other books on the paranormal. You're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronymus.
Hey, is Rosemary still in her physical body? No, she left. Rosemary did so many wonderful encyclopedias. It was just extraordinary. and we enjoyed having her on many times. And I'm so sorry she passed on because she was so dedicated to that kind of work and this kind of work. Oh, well, okay. Well, we're back here with our guest, Dawn Baumann Brunke. Brunke, what does that mean? Does that have a meaning?
I don't know. It's my husband's name, so I don't know.
Well, maybe next time we get together, ask him what it means.
I will. Well, I'd have to look it up. I don't know that he does, but
okay.
I feel like somewhere in the family history it's written down. I just have to locate that information.
So we were moving on this question here. How do we awaken snake in the world today?
Yeah.
Now, this is super important.
It is important, and I think it's one of those questions that has a lot of answers. So
give me all the answers you got.
Give you all I got. All right.
Yeah, I'd like a lot of answers.
I'll give you a medley of answers.
Okay.
I'll give you a buffet board of answers, and you can choose what you like here. So I think it starts, I always like to say it starts at home, huh? So educating ourselves and others. For those who are afraid of snakes, I think we can foster fascination by learning about some of the amazing aspects of snake. My husband and I lived with 2 snakes for a while. We had a ball python named Carl and a corn snake, beautiful orange corn snake named Chloe. And we had people come who would be afraid of snakes, who didn't want to touch them, who actually a couple of people who were really phobic of snakes. And one of the things we did, and we didn't do it by planning, but just naturally, is we would talk about the snakes and share stories, and sometimes we'd hold them and show them to them. And almost always, by the end of the time that people visited, they would ask to touch the snake or to hold it even sometimes. So again, I think a lot of times there's stereotypes and there's fixed ideas about snakes that aren't, real at all. And so again, fostering fascination, learning a little bit more about the really amazing aspects of snakes. And that's why I did that little appendix about the different types of snakes, because each one is pretty amazing. I think there's not a snake that's not amazing. So sometimes simple observation can really arouse great curiosity and wonder, and then we start to feel less afraid, huh?
Sure, especially from my own perspective. We posted a couple of snakes from our house that were in our house. I would find it very uncomfortable for a snake to live in our cemented floors and things like that, but they seem to enjoy it.
They like to burrow down, they like their little spaces. And it's interesting where snakes will go.
So I don't mind picking up the smaller ones, but some of the larger ones I'm surprised at. I really am. But they very quietly, they can get under the smallest places. And this about 6-foot one, yellow-green one, and it certainly wasn't a poisonous snake. I didn't want to pick it up, but I was wondering how was I going to be able to handle it, and I didn't have to worry about it because it went up to a wall and crawled under the wooden aspects of the wall, which just surprised the hell out of me because I thought that it was too big for that. So they can make themselves.
They have their own way for sure. And like our snake, our ball python Carl, when we would take him out, and sometimes I'd let him just, go around the house and move around, and we'd always have to keep an eye on him. But he was obsessed with our heating vent, and he always wanted to go in there, which he was not allowed to do, of course, because we didn't want, crispy fried Carl. So I'd have to pull him out, and snakes are amazingly strong. If you've ever tried to, persuade a snake not to go one way, they're all muscle, they're just incredibly strong. And, but they are interesting to hold. I mean, are you afraid of holding a snake, or just the large ones?
Just the large ones, because I'm not familiar with it, and yet all of us just watch them crawl by.
Right.
And,
right. Yeah. They definitely have their own ideas. If you think snakes are dumb, they're not. They have their own ideas about where they want to go and how they're going to get there. And to me, it's fascinating. Watch snakes move. I was really always fascinated by that. Anyway, going back to your question, how can we awaken snake? I think we touched on this before on a personal level. It's really important, I think, to release outgrown aspects of self, huh? Kind of like be a snake, shed what's too limiting paradigms and ideas and beliefs that are too small-minded, maybe for us, huh?
Well, yes,
And
but oh, go ahead.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
and like a snake, take time to digest, huh?
Yes,
Sometimes we need to sit with things for a while and try them on before responding right away. I
now
mean, I use
that's
that in,
that's
yeah,
something that's something I have learned from snakes.
yeah,
Taking your
yeah, take
time
time.
and delaying things to think them over two or three
Hmm.
times before you have to
Hmm.
do something and that kind of thing. And it really does make a very big difference.
It
Uh,
does make a difference. And I had to do that with this book several times. Sometimes the ideas would just be too big and they'd feel too overwhelming, and I felt I couldn't even write about it. So I just had to sit with it and just be with it. And sometimes not even think about it, sometimes just be with it. You know what I mean?
mhm.
At a kind of a deep down level. So,
We
and I try to remind myself this with my husband when we talk politics, listen, listen before you respond, and take time to see the other person's point of view. Because again, I do think that we are in all this all together. And so on a world level, I think it's so important to embrace diversity. Um,
absolutely. Yeah, the
yeah,
more
and
diverse.
not just
Yeah.
diversity of different religions and colors and all that, but also diversity of ideas. That's kind of what's the big hot thing right now. So to listen to other ideas and again take time to digest sometimes, huh? Sometimes sitting with it can help.
Well, let's talk more about. You mentioned this a couple of times
Hmm.
about what snake protects and how this relates to us as individuals. And I'm mentioning this again. You talked about this a little bit earlier, but I seem to think that this is one of the things I would like some of our listeners to take home. How does snake as a that's what is a snake as a protector of sacred spaces? What can
Hmm.
you tell us about that?
Hmm.
How it
Well,
does it
again,
do
I
that?
mean, I mean, we can relate it to Kundalini, to this energy of awakening, and I think Snake does protect that,
Hmm.
and it can appear fearsome to us. I think you mentioned this before. I forget what you were talking about, but you were saying you were both excited about something but fearful too, and that always seems to me to kind of go with Snake in a way. Snake, it can arise. Kind of bring up some really ancient fears that we have or some deep rooted fears. And yet there's something about that that can be exciting. And I think it's because it's freeing.
Hmm.
So on the one aspect of snake, it does protect us. It appears um, terrifying when we're not ready to go, maybe when we're unprepared to awaken. But it also is that initiator. And I think that's what the excitement speaks to. And it helps us to awaken, to evolve, to loosen up, to move to larger spaces in our consciousness and in our awareness, huh?
Well,
And
when you
yeah,
say
go
it's a
ahead.
protector of hidden treasures, do how do they how do they feel? If it's possible to know this, how do they feel about the hidden treasures from the standpoint of obviously they can't carry them away or anything like that, but what is their relationship to it?
Well, I think Snake, from the very earliest of times, has been a protector and a guardian.
Oh, does that
So,
come from the stories in which they used to put snakes in certain boxes to keep people from opening them and things of that nature?
well, that could be, yeah, that would be using the terrifying aspect of
Hmm.
Snake. So, be for prevention. You don't open this box until you're ready, huh? Until
Yeah.
you've been
Hmm.
initiated.
Yeah.
So, Snake both protects and keeps things out, but also initiates and helps birth the new. So, you know, yeah, I think just bringing it back to your question is what can we do to awaken Snake? I think we can be present to ourselves and others, but also, very importantly to ourselves and just to recognize our shadow material, to recognize what terrifies us or angers us, and to work with that, huh?
Well, maybe the time it takes them to decide what they want to do is the same kind of thing that we should be doing instead of just doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe it's something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's also, what's going on globally is just to welcome the reemergence of the sacred feminine. And it's certainly not by putting down the male, but by helping create more of a sacred marriage between the male and female that joins in a much more balanced consciousness.
Indeed.
So on the larger levels, I think that's how we can awaken snake. Huh?
Well, what about the association of ancient snake with the goddess worshipping cultures? Was suppression of the female divine the reason that the snake became something to be feared?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, don't you think so?
Of course. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I
So
just want to
for
emphasize that.
sure. Yeah, let's emphasize that.
Yeah, well, it's the problem is that it's from if you had read our book on the Statue of Liberty dealing with
Yeah,
this,
I'm actually going to because it really sounds fascinating and,
well,
and
it
I love hearing about it. Yeah.
well, Laura and I worked on that for how many years? I don't know, 6 years? Yeah,
Hmm.
because there was so much material, a lot of material that we really didn't want to read. Um, let's see. The suppression of the female divine, the reason the snake became something to be feared, uh, was that intentional?
I think on some levels probably intentional, like maybe the some, aspect of the Garden of Eden story was because it was written kind of from this, agenda of putting down, suppressing the goddess culture so that the sky god culture could come in. At other levels, I think, it probably was unconscious and it was the way that we needed to evolve and we needed to experience this other extreme, this other aspect of who we are. So I think that's one of those questions that has a lot of different answers depending on what specifically we're looking at. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it has a lot of answers. So let's say yes and.
Well,
Yes, both.
why do you refer to snake in the singular and without the in front of it? Most people would say you wrote a book about snakes, plural, but you say you wrote a book about snake, singular.
Well, yeah, it's the editor in me. So I would just differentiate between when I say snakes, I mean physical living snakes or, snakes that move around and things like that. When I speak about snake as a singular with capital S, I'm speaking about, the spirit of snake, the archetype of snake, the cosmic snake. So it's kind of snake energy writ large, huh? So that's just the difference and how I talk about it in the book.
What was the biggest surprise that you learned about
Hmm.
when you studied? Because there are so many
Question.
things that I learned, but you've
Yeah.
been doing this for a long, long time.
I
Um,
think it was the diversity and how Snake was involved at so many deep levels in so many different aspects of our connection with it, throughout the ages, and in connection with humanity, and just in how many different areas. And I mean, I actually could have written another how many pages? 250 pages additional just on other things. So I had to really kind of focus it right on the key issues that I saw with Snake or the key areas that Snake, speaks to in humanity. So yeah, it would have been that. It would have been just the incredible diversity of snakes in the world, and then the incredible diversity of snake as an archetype in psychology, in medicine, in mythology, and so on, in ourselves, in the esoteric tradition, in terms of awakening and so on.
well,
Yeah.
after you finished your book, was there any experience in your thinking there's something else you should have put in it and didn't have a chance to?
Well, no, what it did, I'll just tell you about my next book, is I was just really fascinated about shadow animals, animals that people really dislike. Why is that? And so really my next book is going to be about shadow animals and about the animals that
Oh,
many of us are fearful of, and really looking in depth more at different animals and why that is, and hoping to retrieve some of that, the gifts of those animals. So that they're seen in different ways.
wow. While we have the time, could you say something more about that? Because I'm fascinated by that.
Well, just, I mean, I think snake was what initiated that in me because snake is such a shadow animal, and some people have such deep, kind of dark feelings about snake. Not everyone. Some
I,
people love snakes, and I met a lot of people who really were wonderful snake educators and such. Um, but I think shadow animals, what I'm calling shadow animals, are the animals that we're afraid of, speak to something in our psyche.
and I'm
And they,
afraid we have run out of
oh,
time. Oh,
okay.
darn
All
it.
righty.
Darn it.
Well,
Well,
it was a pleasure talking with you.
it certainly was Dawn. Dawn, Baumann, Brunke, Awakening the Ancient Power of Snake, Transformation, Healing, and Enlightenment Bear and Company. Go to animalvoices.net. That's her website. We'll see you next week on 21st Century Radio with Dr. Zohara.